So yeah, let's just start then. So hi and welcome everyone for joining us today. My name is Christelle and I'm with Dublin Pride. I'm the Communications and Digital Events Officer. And this is our dialogue with An Garda Síochána. I hope I'm pronouncing this correctly.
Yes.
Panel talk, thank you, to mark the end of Anti-Racism Month, which was this March, or which is still going for one more day. Today, I am delighted to welcome you, Geraldine Greene, of the Garda National Diversity and Integration Unit, to discuss the Gardaí's response to discrimination and crimes faced by racialized groups, as well as LGBTQ people. And joining us today are Gordon Grehan from TENI, Transgender Equality Network Ireland. He's the operations manager. We have Dowling, who works with me at Dublin Pride, and Pradeep Mahadeshwar, who is an artist, an activist, and a Dublin Pride volunteer. So despite our current restrictions and despite lockdowns, racist incidents and assaults were at an all-time high in 2020, according to a report by the Irish Network Against Racism, which was recently published. There was these incidents included a Chinese woman who was racially abused and then pushed into a canal. We had a group who screamed homophobic racist slurs at a mixed race man on a public street. And a Black Irish man, for example, was attacked and threatened with a bottle by a neighbor. So the report also finds that levels of trust in Gardaí to address racism continue to be low in relation to harassment, and that Garda efforts to tackle racism before it escalates need to improve. And even where cases are attended by Gardaí in accordance with good practices, responses are inadequate to protect victims from ongoing abuse and violence. So I guess my first question goes to you, Geraldine. So racism is very much still an issue in Ireland and it's not going away. So maybe you could start by telling us about your work with the Garda National Diversity Unit and what you're doing to improve this.
Sure. Thank you very much. And thanks for the invite today. I'm delighted to be here. My name is Geraldine Greene. I'm one of the sergeants in the national unit, the Diversity and Integration Unit. And we have a national responsibility for dealing with all outward-facing diversity and integration issues that require a policing response. So just to give you an idea of some of those things, we liaise with both the public, victims, investigators, prosecutors, NGOs, CSOs, and other support services. We also are responsible for developing policy and strategy in the area of diversity and integration and hate crime. And we also oversee the implementation of that policy and of those strategies. And we're also the national point of contact for the EU for hate crime. So that's just a few of the basic things that we do. But the main thing that we do is that we're the point of contact, we're the national point of contact in relation to these issues that you're speaking about. We don't investigate them per se ourselves, but we would liaise between people and we would take third-party referrals when people refer victims to us, say from another agency. We also develop training, and that's probably one of the biggest things that I can talk about today that we're doing to address all of this, all of the racism, all of the increases that you're speaking about. And just on one point in relation to the INR report, there's a 13% increase in the reports that are also coming to the Gardaí. So that goes to INR and the Gardaí, which I know it's still an increase in reporting, but it's a positive increase from our perspective in that hopefully it's an indication of an increase in trust, that more people are also coming to us. Now, I'm not saying this is by any means great news. That's not what I mean. But I mean, it might be an indication of more referrals coming to us. We're working very closely with INR, both on our National Diversity Forum and also on our training. The director of INR is actually a consultant with our developers for all our hate crime training and has been with us for the last 6 months with that development, which is a huge advance for An Garda Síochána to do that. We have engaged the services of a company that have international expertise in hate crime, with police forces all over the world. And we've been working closely with them for about 6 months now on the development of how to respond. And it basically is our response to hate crime, everything from how we deal with victims at the scene, the follow-up, everything that you mentioned, is going to be covered in that training. And at the moment, actually today, I've just stepped away for this meeting. We're doing the final review of content. So that's how close it is to being rolled out to the organization. So this is a really, really positive thing, in that we are targeting the entire organization. Everybody will have to undergo, all 15,000 people have to undergo hate crime training. There's learning pathways in it that are targeted at, say, our call takers or our prosecutors, or, certain people will have different roles that require either more or less training. Say our civilian staff will also do the training, but they won't have to do all the elements of it. But the training and the rollout of that training is what we see anyway as one of the biggest things that we can do in educating and building confidence in our own people, so that their ability to investigate is also seen by victims and the public. That increase in our confidence will knock on to an increase in confidence to report to us and our ability to report. So, I mean, some of the incidents that you spoke about that were reported to INR, some of them were also reported to us, thankfully. The incident of the lady in the canal, we were actually brought into the investigation of that, myself and my colleague, and also like a special investigator was assigned to that incident, and it received the highest level of investigation in Blanchardstown to deal with that. That's how it was dealt with. And that's the kind of response to these type of crimes that we're, hoping that will happen more and more as a norm, as opposed to it being, an exception. We do absolutely appreciate there is an underreporting of hate crime of all kinds, and our commissioner is on record of saying that. And when we launched our strategy at the end of 2019, one of the main objectives was to address that underreporting. And a lot of that was going to be through the training, but also through the introduction of the hate crime definition, and also a non-crime hate incident definition, to allow people to report crimes, incidents that don't reach a criminal threshold. And that we will take that report. Our policy and procedures that will, underlie all of our training and our strategy are finished and ready for sign off. And one of the things in that is that it is an obligation on a Garda to take a report of an incident where there's a motive, a discriminatory motive, and that the deciding factor is the perception of the victim or any other person. And at the reporting stage, there's no need for any other corroborating evidence. And that's a sort of a move away from what's normal police practice or culture, I suppose, where we are always looking for evidence. But with these type of incidents, we have commitments at the highest level in the Guards that these will be the reports will be taken. Now, how they're investigated or further inquiries, is a matter for the facts of that, if you understand, but that the report is taken and recorded on our system. And there's a number of things that are, that there's a huge advantage for that for a number of reasons, not alone to show the victim that we are taking it seriously, but also our pulse system, where we record all our crime, also has some changes made to it since the end of last year, which allows us to have a H identifier, we call it. So all incidents and crimes that have a hate related motive will be flagged, and they're easily then to identify. we can search the system. It means that repeat victimization is easy to pick up, repeat offending, maybe repeat low-level incidents that might not seem that important, but that we will be able to identify that pattern and maybe see escalations of tensions or of behavior in an area. And because we monitor all of these types of incidents on a daily basis, our unit are able to see that picture across the country on a daily basis. Again, we can only deal with the information that we get in and the information that's reported to us. So INAR's report, while we always welcome our critical friends always, and it shows the underreporting, we also then know the work that has to be done and what's left, what we still need to do in relation to encouraging more people to come to us. And I'll finish up before somebody else comes in. I'm sorry for going on, but just a couple of other small things, well, big things really. Online reporting, and I spoke about this a few times. It is complete and ready to launch, and it was just waiting for the policy and procedures. But we will be rolling that out in the next month or so. So people can report a hate crime or incident online, and it will come directly to our office, where we'll make sure that it's sent to the relevant district for investigation. And the other thing is the formalizing of third-party referrals. So we'll have that formal system in place where, like TENI or LGBT Ireland, can send a report to us on behalf of somebody else with their permission, obviously, and then we can contact them and investigate it that way. So they're just a few of the things that we're doing, and I know we have a long way to go. There's a lot to be done, but that's the role of our unit and what we're doing at the moment. So I'll stop talking now and hand it back over to you, Christelle.
Thank you so much, Geraldine, for kind of clarifying what it is exactly that you're doing and what you want to do going forward. I might just open the question up to the panel then, and maybe start with you, Gordon. What do you think the issues may be around this underreporting, maybe with a special focus of the transgender community? Why do you think there's this hesitation to go to the police when a hate crime or hate incident occurs?
Yeah, I mean, thank you, Sergeant Greene, for giving us such a great overview. I have to say, I'm part of the committee of the Diversity Integration Strategy Committee, and so I'm kind of familiar with a lot of the updates that Sergeant Greene gave there. And I have to say, I really welcome it, and it's so significant to see the amount of work and the investment that An Garda Síochána are putting into this. It's brilliant to see, and I'm really thrilled about it. I think, you know, when we talk about, in particular, when we talk about hate crime, you know, it's complicated and it's kind of complex, and there's obviously the An Garda Síochána have a role in that, but we have to also be aware of the fact that in Ireland we don't have hate crime legislation as of yet. So, you know, that makes it a very interesting kind of challenge in Ireland to even understand what a hate crime is, how it can be investigated, how it can be prosecuted, how, you know, if there might be enhanced sentences. It's really kind of well understood in a lot of other jurisdictions, but we don't really have that understanding in Ireland. So that's always been an issue for us, I think, with the transgender community. We started doing our STOD report, which was Stop Transphobia and Discrimination. I think maybe 7-8 years ago now, which was about recording incidents that might reach the bar of crime, but might also be a hate motivated incident, because we knew that this was happening in the community, but we also knew that it was not being reported or recorded anywhere properly or accurately. And there is a huge issue around people reporting. There is a lack of trust in An Garda Síochána, and I think, you know, that's a fact. I think we also have to look at kind of the legacy, the history of kind of where we are. The Gardaí are a mechanism of the state, and if the state did not like a certain group of people, for example, you know, like being gay was kind of only decriminalised in 1993. So up until then, unfortunately, the Gardaí were the mechanism of the state in which to enforce kind of legislation or to enforce the societal norms of the time. And I think we're still dealing with that legacy in a lot of ways, and there is a lack of trust in that, you know, certainly among older members of the LGBT community, older members of the trans community, where they remember, you know, those days and feeling like you couldn't trust a guard, you couldn't go to a guard for help or support. That was not what they were seen as. And that perception has to change, but it doesn't happen overnight. It is kind of a building of trust, and I think it's very important to look at the historical context and the legacy that we're dealing with of that. And I think when we talk about the trans community, and I'm sure other minority communities would face kind of similar barriers or challenges, there is a lack of understanding in society at large. There's a lack of knowledge. There's a lack, there's a lot of misconceptions, preconceptions people have about transgender people. And so trans people are often very careful about themselves and who they interact with and how they have those interactions, and are very careful about putting themselves at risk of being questioned for who they are, or feeling uncomfortable or feeling unsafe. And I think reporting to An Garda Síochána is sometimes one of those areas where they don't feel safe, and they feel that that they're possibly putting themselves in a vulnerable position. We always encourage, when we're talking to people, we always encourage them to report if they feel comfortable to do so. But it's not something that's easy for everyone. And I think there's also a re-traumatization element to kind of reporting something that's happened to you, and that can be very difficult for people. And that's even more difficult if you feel like you're explaining something that's happened to you to somebody who doesn't understand, who fundamentally doesn't get the fact of your identity and how that has made this incident more complex, or even more difficult for you to come to terms with. So the reporting, there's so much, like I think I've just made it more complicated by talking about it, but there's so much to take on board when we talk about reporting. It's not as simple as messaging and saying the Gardaí are doing this amazing work, we trust them now, go and talk to them. There's a lots of different elements that have to happen in and around that to make that possible for people. So there's the societal attitudes, there's the legislation, there's the great work that the Guards are doing. And it's building that community trust. And I think we as an organization and we as a community have a huge role in that as well, in kind of working with An Garda Síochána to kind of see, how we get to a better place where people are able to get justice or be supported as a victim, or, interact with An Garda Síochána in their day-to-day lives, which is something that a lot of people have to do.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's some great insight. Pradeep, maybe you want to weigh in as well from your perspective as a queer immigrant, and what, if you had experience with reporting hate crime or have heard from others in the community who have had to do it, and maybe their experience.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for arranging this event. Whatever has been said so far, it's so impressive and interesting to know. So by and large, something that racism and hate crime, it's something that we afraid to talk about in public, and especially as a queer space, it is not that glamorous to talk about racism or hate crime or issues related to marginalized communities. So from queer people, from queer person of color background who is immigrant, I am looking at it. It is like there is system, there is some kind of infrastructure, but people are not aware about this, not familiar about it. So when you come here out of Ireland for work or education, you come with your work visa, work permit, and all the process is such a rigid and outdated that when you come here and when you face any kind of discrimination, direct or indirect, or racism, when you face it, you just get confused, and people get confused. What happened to me? It is right or wrong, or how can I report it, or is it something worth that I can go to the Garda and report? But because there's a huge fear around going to the Garda. If I go to the Garda, it might affect on my work permit, or it might affect my visa application. Or in the long term, if I go to the Garda and if my name comes in the their record, it might affect my future prospect of application for citizenship. So all these things are so sensitive and so intertwined that people get afraid to go to the
Oh, I think
Garda. And I'm in Ireland for now more support group for Asian immigrants, LGBTQ Asian immigrants, and what I see that is a significant amount of fear among these people that they don't want to go to the Garda, and they just fear, no, if I go to the Garda and if my HR at workplace that they will come to know. So there is also something, there's raised understanding of the complexity of this reports system. And also there is some fear that, okay, if I go to report, so from where can I produce the proof, or who will stand up for me if I will be alone there? And that just whole thing that just then put them off to report. So I was talking with someone three months back, and that person was telling me that I got this incident and it is just affecting me and my partner directly, and it's my neighbor. My neighbor is my neighbor is European national. I'm and my partner, we both are both here immigrants, so we don't feel that we have power to go and talk with Garda against him. So there could be some better communication system that will explain people, that will help people to understand. And there is another communication point of view. There is language barrier. People come here, they are not fluent in English. They don't know the communication uh, uh, this channel. And that is also creating another fear among, oh my God, I don't know this language, or if how can I talk, or how can I explain what happened to me? And that whole thing from my perspective, that just help that is not helping people to go to the Garda on their own. Uh, People choose to go to Garda when something physical harm happens to them. If somebody slap or punch or stab. Otherwise, they don't. Otherwise, they don't go to the Garda. And thank you for sharing that information. I would suggest there should be more visible. There should be more visible infrastructure online that could help people to understand this system, how it works. People don't know how it works. Like, I don't know. I am living in this country for 8 years. I don't know how it works. If I go to the Garda, what will be the next stage, and how much I have to involve, or how much I have to contribute to this whole process. And that just makes me feel afraid that no, I don't want. If something drastic happens, then I will go to then I will think to going to this system, but other, I just afraid.
Yeah, thanks, Pradeep. I think that also ties in very well with what Gordon here said, that there is this fear maybe of re-traumatization, of a lack of understanding, and maybe just, you know, a general misunderstanding or kind of lack of understanding of what it is that the guards will do when you report a crime. So maybe Geraldine, maybe you could just talk to us about, if a person from a marginalized community experiences a hate crime or hate incident and is unsure of how to proceed, what would you suggest they do?
Yeah, look, I mean, I've really listened to what you've said, Pradeep, and I understand the huge difficulties. I really do. I don't know if you're aware. No, Gordon is probably aware of our Garda diversity officers, and this is this role that they have is something that we're trying to publicize more. And these are specially trained Gardaí and sergeants that are in every division in the country. At the moment, we have 281 in the country, and they are specially trained to deal with minority and diverse groups. They may not have all the answers. They may not be able to tell you everything you need to know, but they will certainly know how to go about getting that for you. Plus, we support them on the ground. Our office supports them on the ground. But when something happens, if you don't want to go to a Garda station or you don't feel comfortable going to a Garda station, you can ring a Garda station and ask for help. You could ring a Garda station and ask for a Garda diversity officer. And if there's no one there, to get someone to ring you back or to make an appointment with a diversity officer. Certainly that is something I would do if I was in your position, because I know the additional training that they get. Plus, I know they can just pick up the phone to us in our office and we'll certainly support them from there. The online reporting, yeah, I mean, it's going to be useful, I hope, for people that mightn't feel confident to come into us, or that might want to, withhold some details about themselves, or that might not want somebody turning up at their home or whatever. So that's something that will be very well publicised on our Garda website. We had planned, and Gordon is probably aware of it, of a huge hate crime awareness campaign, which should have happened this month. And it was going to tie in with Anti-Racism Month. Unfortunately, because of things out of our control, we have to push it out slightly, but it's still very much going to happen early in Q2. And that will include a segment on crime call. We'll have a press conference. We'll have a huge poster and leaflet campaign. We'll have, lots of things going on during that month. And I'm sorry it hasn't happened in this month, which was a very significant month, but unfortunately that was out of our control. But I 100% agree, we need to do more to publicise what's needed and what you can do, how you can report. I just finished doing up a very simple hate crime leaflet, and it has all of that information in it, and we have them printed, and we're going to have them delivered out. We're going to use the forum, Gordon, maybe, and get them out into agencies and out into the wider community. They'll also be available, in the front desk of a Garda station, and they'll be available online. So it has very simple steps of what you can do, where you can report, what hate crime means. And I'm aware, as you said, there is no legislation. So there might be that, uncertainty with people as to what they can expect. But we will investigate if it's a hate crime that's, say, for example, an assault that has a motive of, say, gender related, just for example, then we will investigate that as an assault. We take the report as an assault, but also there's the additional layer of the discriminatory motive, and that then puts in place, or we will put in place then, additional support for the victim, whatever needs to be done then on top of that. But we will investigate as an assault, if you understand. And if there's a prosecution, and hopefully if there's a court case, then we can give evidence in court once there's a conviction that it was investigated as a hate crime. But up until that point, we will investigate it. And a lot of what we will be investigating will be getting directions from the DPP as to how to proceed. And you're right, without legislation, there is that confusion. Hopefully by the end of the year, we should have legislation, or at least the sign of it coming. And that will make it an awful lot easier for yourselves, for anybody reporting, for us as investigators and providing support. So I hear you completely. we need to do more to communicate, and you know, we're going to utilize all our contacts to do that, and get that message out there to please come to us, not to be afraid to come to us. Bring somebody with you. We will get a translator if you need a translator. All those things that you might not be aware that we will do, we will do. And the hate crime information, which will be online, will tell you all that, will tell you what you're entitled to. And your status in the country does not affect you. When you come to us as a victim, that's what we will deal with as a victim. We're not interested in your status in the country. That's another conversation, and that's not something we're interested in. A victim first.
Thanks, Sergeant. So, Gordon, you already mentioned that you had a kind of relationship, or at least consulted with the guards and helped them with their D&I strategy. And I know that we at Dublin Pride, we also had we work with the guards, we work with you, Geraldine. So Jet, maybe if you want to weigh in and tell us a little bit more about, since you're more familiar with how the guards have changed and evolved over the years, if they have, if they haven't, maybe you want to let us know a bit about the progress you've seen, and yeah, just anything that comes to mind.
So yeah, I mean, I've been working with quite a few different Garda divisions and sectional departments over the last few years. And I think just something that's worth touching on with on all of this that Gordon brought out is that one of the huge issues is the historical legacy of the relationship with, in our case, LGBT people with the Guards, but also when it comes to other minorities or other people who experience racism. And it's worth noting as well that it's not just the historical legacy from Ireland, it's an international thing. And sometimes you might think, well, it's not fair that the Gardaí will be tarnished with the same brush as the police in New York or the police in the UK. But the reality is that we live in a very small world now, so that legacy impacts on all of us, and even more so now. So what would have been an issue now may not have been 5 years ago, because we lived in a much bigger world where we weren't aware of everything that was going on. From my just an example myself, I remember being a victim of a hate crime. I remember walking home one evening past the George, and this was about 20 years ago. And at the time, there was a gang going around Dublin queer bashing people, and a lot of people had ended up in hospital. I was one of the people they approached and started shouting abuse and saying they were going to kill me. And obviously, the good Tala boy that I am, my first reaction was to headbutt him, which knocked him out, and I was fine. And had a big trip down to James's to check, and everything was grand. And the next day, I went to the Guards, and I was more afraid walking into Christie Station than I was standing in front of 4 people saying they were going to kill me, because at least they knew how to deal with that situation. But thankfully, I went in and met Finbar Murphy. I think Finbar was the diversity, he was the first LGBT diversity officer in Ireland, and it wasn't the experience that I was expecting. It was something that really made a difference. But the thing is, that was only Dublin at the time. It was only one station that had it. And that, I think, marked the beginning of a change in Garda attitudes. But because it was only one station, it meant that while I got that care, not everyone was getting it. And I think that that's the thing, is people aren't aware of the resources that are available, but also those resources aren't available to everybody because the resources just aren't there. So that's a thing that's, with the introduction of far more Garda diversity officers, with the introduction of third-party reporting, there's huge improvements there. But there's still that legacy in the background. We still consider the fact that, the relationship between LGBT people and the Gardaí had a very strained past, and that's something that we have to constantly be reviewing. And there's an onus on all of us to constantly review that. The Gardaí have a job to improve relations, but we also have a job to look at what's the best for our community, what is the best thing. And however we define a relationship and however we look at this, it always has to be what is going to be the best thing for the community. what's going to make it easier for people to access services, what's going to make it easier for people to report. And there's a job of work on all sides for that. There's also a thing, and I think this is something, especially when we consider in the context of anti-racism month and all of that, is if you're someone like maybe yourself or maybe Gordon, who's been living here for our whole lives, the odds are you probably know a Garda, and if something goes wrong, you probably know a Garda that you're either in school with or you knew from somewhere, and you know how the system works. If you've just moved over here a couple of years ago, you don't know how the system works. You don't realise the peculiar eccentricities of how Ireland operates as a country. And there is an onus on those of us who do know that to be looking to our community and saying, well, how can we help them? So, for example, Pradeep, we say, well, we know each other well. So Pradeep should feel completely free that if he has a situation, he can phone me and say, well, you know how the guard system works, can you help me? And I think that's something that all of us, the white Irish cis community, who obviously don't experience racism to those extents, we have a responsibility to be using that knowledge that we have to help others within the community, recognizing that they are marginalized, that we have got privilege, and we should be using that privilege to support them.
Can I just come in there for a second? Yeah, I totally agree, Jed. Just a couple of things. I came to work in Pearse Street as a young guard in 1993, so I'm really showing my age now. And I came in February, so it was only a few short months before the decriminalisation. But I can remember at the time, like the George was within our district. And I always felt, even from at that stage, there was something fundamentally wrong with why this was illegal, at that age. But Finbar Murphy would have been one of the people that I would have got to know. And you're right, those services were available in Pearse Street because we had the resources and we had the numbers. We did a huge review just earlier this year on our Garda Diversity Network around the country to see what the spread was, to see what level of training they had. And we found out that where we have 281, there's some divisions have 2, some divisions have 30. So what we're doing now with our training is we're addressing those gaps. That's the first part of our training, is where there's gaps with diversity officers, they will receive the first training that's rolled out, priority training. So that's one thing. And you're right, we need to publicise that. The list of Garda diversity officers is on the website, the Garda website. And I know every time I send an email, I send a link, no matter who I send it to, with the up-to-date list, because I want people to have it and to share it and to keep sharing it. And we also try and keep that as up-to-date as possible. Just was something else you touched on there that our training, we invited in, and some of you are sitting in front of me that took part in videos for our training to give that message, that personal message to our guard, and especially our young trainees, that message of what it feels like to be victimized because of who you are. Something about you that you cannot change or shouldn't have to change. And that's the message we keep giving out to young guards, is this is, when you break it down, that's the facts of it. People being targeted because of something about them that they cannot change or shouldn't have to change. And then to hear those personal experiences is a new way of teaching, I think, and a new way of understanding, rather than learning from books, learning from someone standing in front of them who has no personal experience of this, other than teach them the legislation that we have to deal with it. So, and this is partly COVID has meant that everything has had to go online, and we've had to find a new way to teach and a new way to train. And we've just finished as well in the college 2 videos, 2 15-minute segments, one on hate crime and one on diversity and cultural awareness, focusing on unconscious bias. And they're for students, so that before they leave the college, before they come out at all, they will have had that basic training, and then they'll undertake the bigger modules in the hate crime that I've been talking about. But they will have, before they come out, we want to make sure that they have those understandings before they even leave the college. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Amazing. like this. I think overall, I think LGBT community need to know this unconscious bias, and that is one of the frustration I face. Like most people who are cis white people, they are not, they know, but they don't want to talk about these unconscious biases. And when you come from somewhere out and you're a person of color within the community here don't help you. They don't support you. You have to be strong. And even if you face hate crime or racism or sexual racism, you just when you talk about it, in most cases you just outcast because you are calling us bad. So no, I'm not calling anyone bad. I'm just saying what happened to us, what is happening to people of queer people of color, and that need to be talked. Garda system is it could be better, and they will come and help, but also within the community it need to be more discussed and show some empathy for 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 each other. That will be that would be helpful.
Yeah, I think that's an important point you raised there, about kind of trying and having that kind of exposure, because I think it's very easy to, when you are in that bubble and you maybe do not know many immigrant people or maybe queer people or people of color, that it's hard to empathize maybe with their experience. So I think that the training that you mentioned there sounds like an important step in the right direction. And it's definitely important to keep that line of communication open, just so we keep each other accountable as well. So yeah, we're almost out of time, and I would actually thank you first for joining me, and then also ask you for maybe a last statement from each of you. Something you would like to know, would like people to know that have maybe experienced hate crime or discrimination, and that you would want them to take away from this. Maybe we start with Gordon, and then Pradeep, Jed, and then Geraldine, you can have the closing statement.
Thanks. This has been so interesting. So thanks everyone, and thanks for having me. I think just, I've had lots of thoughts as everyone's been talking, but I suppose one thing that struck me is that this lack of understanding of what a hate crime is, within our community and also within society at large. And I think it's really important to understand the impact that a hate crime has on a community. Like I'm struck by what you were talking about, Jed, in terms of the queer bashing in Dublin. I remember, when that happened, and other times when that was happening. And that has a chilling effect on a community. It's bigger than just what happens to one victim. It sends a message to a group in society that they should expect this, that they should change how they live, they should change how they navigate their world, because this is something that might happen to them. And I think what we find in our work with trans people is that it lowers people's expectations of what they can expect for their life. It lowers their expectations of their day-to-day existence and how they feel they're going to be treated, or how they should be treated by other people. And I think that's what we really need to get across about hate crime, is that it has this huge impact on a community, not just on the victim of the crime itself, but beyond that. And that's why it's so important to tackle it, and it's so important that this work is happening, and this collaboration and this dialogue is happening. I welcome it so much. It's vital this happens. And I suppose just on a TENI note, like for anyone who's watching or you're listening, we are here to support anyone. If you've experienced a hate motivated incident, a hate crime, something form of discrimination, get in touch and we will support you through whatever process is good and comfortable for you. So we are there to help people.
Well said, Gordon. In my take, hate crime or racism or any kind of discrimination, it is not black and white. It is not distinct. It is present among us with different ways and visibility. We just need to talk about it. We need to create the discourse about it and talk about it more. There will be system. No system is perfect, but if we keep talking about it, people will get more and more educate themselves. They will get scope to educate themselves and help each other. Thank you.
I think my final words would be aware of the community that's there to support you. If you're afraid, if you're unsure about going to the Gardaí, if you're a victim of hate crime, be aware that there is a huge community there with organisations like TENI, LGBT Ireland belong to, that can act on your behalf and that can support you. So you don't have to walk into the Garda station on your own. There are people there, so be aware of that. And then the other big thing is don't be part of the problem. Don't be part of the problem that's contributing to racism and contributing to hate crimes. Be aware of your privilege and check it.
All fantastic, everything that you've said. My message is please come to us. Please, feel that it's a safe place to come and speak to the guards. Pick up the phone to our office. Email us at diversity@garda.ie if you need that extra support, and we will find you the support you need. And what I always say to people, if you don't get the service that you deserve in a Garda station, please report it. Please make a complaint. And I hate having to say that, and I hate admitting, that sometimes we fall very short, but it happens. And if that does happen to you, please have the confidence and the courage to complain about it. And if you are unsure how to do that, contact our office and we'll help you with that process. But I always say, to anybody, whether I'm a service that I'm expecting myself, what would I want for, my mother, my sisters, my brothers, what would I want for them? And not to accept anything less than that. And anything less than that is not good enough, and we need to do better. So that's my message.
Thanks so much. I just want to reiterate that. So if you are the victim of a hate crime, if you are the victim of a hate incident, please either report it to one of the LGBTQ organizations in the country, like TENI, like LGBT Ireland, like Dublin Lesbian Line. There are so many out there here to support you, as well as the Gardaí. Don't be afraid to reach out. You can also message us at info@dublinpride.ie if you have any questions or unsure where to go. Thank you so much, Jed, Gordon, Geraldine, Pradeep, for joining us today. Yes, and I hope you enjoyed our little webinar. That's it from us. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.